get to you and talk to you about being a university president and the challenges of that first. But first, I want to talk to you, get your outsider perspective here. Coming into Washington, we are in a situation now where the approval ratings for our president and for our Congress are at new lows by the day and shrinking to the point where approval ratings will soon be studied in the science department, because only there do they have instruments that can measure something so small. So I want to talk to you about, as somebody who's involved with creating new minds, new leaders to come out into the world, what do you think of in terms of government? Is it an impediment? Is it an emergency you've got to send new graduates to fix? Give us your perspective.
Yeah, I don't know if I could solve all the problems of Washington now, but I do think there is an issue with this sort of quality of rhetoric in this country, the quality of discussion. I hope that as we educate young people, they can help to think about that and to engage in ways that are fruitful and more constructive than they are now. Universities have always been places where people ponder, where people reflect, where there's a demand for a high level of engagement, of thought. I hope they can contribute to this, but it is a challenge. I do think we're at a place where rhetoric has diminished.
Does it have to step in? If great national questions, if great global questions aren't getting discussed and adjudicated in Washington, is there a greater role for the university, and you as a university president, do you have to kind of push issues into the public conversation in a way that they're not being put there?
I don't know if you can change things by pushing things, and there's too much pushing right now. I mean, what you need is space for reflection and a kind of expectation of a higher level of discussion, a higher level of engagement. Perhaps the way you do that is to provide an example of it. And I do think universities perhaps can play a role in that. I don't think we'll fix it overnight. I think of it more of a healing process than a sort of quick fix. How can we think more seriously and engage one another more fully in the issues that matter? Universities can play a role. They can't do everything, but I hope we can educate people who can do that.
Let me talk to you about your role at Notre Dame. Let's start first with college costs, which is the thing when I talk to people. They always want to know, why is college so expensive? Why is college so expensive?
It's expensive because it's always been expensive proposition, and I think education at the highest level is expensive. Now, because what are they? What are universities? Universities are communities of scholars at the highest level, engaging in their field, creating knowledge, teaching students, disseminating knowledge. To sustain that level of talent, really, and to educate people isn't cheap, and particularly the demand for excellence in education is great. There's no doubt about it. We turn down 7 people for every person we can accept for a slot at Notre Dame. It's greater at other universities. People know that education is valuable. So the demand is, and the other thing to be said, and it must be said, half our students are on financial aid, half of them. That financial aid, on average, pays 67% of the costs. So the sticker price that always gets talked about is misleading. Why? How do those kids get financial aid? The generosity of a lot of people. A lot of our alumni find it noble to help people get a chance for an education. So I think that has to be part of it. I think it's inescapable that education is expensive. I think there are ways to diminish the costs, but it costs.
What do you think of the president's proposal that he outlined in August? He said there should be a way to tie rankings with the affordability question, so that schools are ranked on how well they get students to graduate, but then also how much debt they're left with and what the return is on that investment. Yeah. What do you think of that?
I'm for transparency. I'm not sure the government has always proven its ability to sort of set market conditions effectively. So we'll see what he says, but I'm absolutely all for transparency on those issues.
Was that a brushback pitch? In other words, figure it out yourself, or we'll come in and we'll...
I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was. But yeah, we'll see. Yeah. I mean, the thing about it, I mean, the thing we have to recognize, if you look at the history of human race in the West, universities have been the most powerful engine for intellectual innovation the human race has ever created. You look at the rise of science, you look at the rise of technology, you look at political ideas and the shaping that shaped this country and our structures. They arose out of universities. Be careful about trying to get that on the cheap. I mean, you can educate a person in arithmetic in a cheap way. That's right. But these communities of scholars and students have been transformative for Western culture and transformative for the human race. And it's important not to think they're dispensable in easy ways or kind of we can cut costs. You can cut costs, but you're not going to get the powerful innovation that has characterized universities for 8 centuries.
So you mean I can't just log on and watch a class?
You can log on, and actually that's a great thing, but don't think that that's a substitute for these communities of scholars and students that have been such a powerful engine for innovation.
So is there a mix? If doing it all remotely and online is not the answer and it disrupts the community, give us where things are going to be in 10 years where there's clearly going to be some kind of mix.
I'm not sure I can say exactly what it's going to be. I think digital does enhance education. There's a class that's taught at Notre Dame that is on domestic security, and we have students all around the world, and there's 2 students in London, a few students in China, and a few students in Italy that log on to this. Now that's a great class. I mean, that would be a powerful way to have a class. That doesn't cut costs, but it does enhance. Now, for access to education for people that don't have it, either because of the circumstances of their life, either because of economics, or they're in a place where they can't get it, digital does give access that they didn't have before. And that's a great thing. And we should be part of that. Everybody should be part of that. But don't think that you can get rid of traditional campuses by putting in digital. I don't think you can without remainder.
What am I getting, though, when I'm at the campus? Could I get it in a weekend? Could I get it in a month-long period?
If what you're interested in is knowledge about a specific area, just a very specific set of information or skills, maybe. But education is so much more than that, isn't it? I mean, we all look back on those of us who had a chance to go to a higher educational institution, the people you interacted with, the friends you made, the kind of issues you discussed, it shapes who we are. I always feel when I teach a class, the most important conversations are certainly not my lecture, not even the conversation in the class, is the conversation students have with one another as they go to the dining hall, as they go to the dorm. If I've engaged them, if I've made them excited about learning, they talk to one another, and that's where they learn. That's where they grapple with the real issues. That only happens on a college campus. So, yeah, there is a place for MOOCs, there is a place for getting access, but I don't think you can replicate the powerful impact of a university through digital technology.
In talking to people who have college-age kids, I've seen something, and I wonder if you have, which is the greater emphasis on, here's what we're paying, what exactly are we getting at, and what's the return going to be in terms of jobs, income, kind of making sure they get the bang for the buck in ways that are measurable. Do you see more of that, and is that good or bad?
There is more of that, and that should be. People should ask that question. It's a huge investment. It's fine. But measurable in terms of what? Measurable in terms of your income. My great fear is that education becomes yet another commodity. We give you something, you go out and get a return on your investment. That's fine. If people want to do that, no problem. But education has always been thought of, at its best in the West, as transformative. It shapes the kind of person you are. It shapes how you think. It shapes what you value. That's hard to measure. That's hard to measure in terms of return on investment. And I'm all for measuring, but there are some things that can't be measured well. And I don't think we should reduce to income the potential for later learning, the value of an education.
Notre Dame has a pretty strong core curriculum. Mm-hmm. Stay the same? Should it ever be what it was? Or if it's got to change, how does it change?
We have that coming up, and it will be a fight. I think it is. it's difficult with the fragmentation of our culture, and that's not a criticism of the culture necessarily, to find a core of learning that every student must have. We can't give up that fight. We just can't give up that fight, because if we don't have if we can't say, look, for a citizen, this is what you need to know. These are the fundamental things you need to know. It's hard to see how the society can cohere. It's hard to see how the society stays together. If we can't say to young people, look, here's the essence of the kind of skills and knowledge you should have, whether it's about history, whether it's about sociology, whatever. If we can't say that, if we throw up the white flag, I don't think society can cohere. I really don't. And now it's a challenge, yeah, and there'll be a great fight about this core curriculum. Yeah, that's fine, but that's what we do at universities. We haggle things out.
What's your view of the students? If the parents have their views, which are associated with the check that they write, and the professors will have their view about the curriculum that allows this cohesion that you talk about, what are the students, what's their view of the world?
Well, it's hard to put that in kind of one person, but they are engaged. One of the great gifts of being at a university is engage young people who are bright and interested. They're bright and interested. I think they're struggling with the major issues. Obviously, it's a more international. They have a more international perspective for all of them. I think that's important. I think they have digital technology is important. It shapes them, but I think they're grappling with the future as much as we are, and they're as nervous as we are about certain things.
What role does faith play in that, given the unique role that Notre Dame has? Well, I'll leave it at that.
I think, I say this, and I don't say this to brag, but I think one of the gifts of being in a place like Notre Dame is strive to put the unity back in university, that we strive to teach them intellectually at the very highest level, second to none, to engage moral issues, to engage their responsibility to society, and to engage faith. No one can say at this time in history that religion, faith, and spirituality is irrelevant. Even if you don't believe any of it, it shapes who we are, it shapes how we interact, and it shapes the lives of many, many people in this country. We need to find a way to engage that at the highest level, that engages in a conversation with the wider culture. And to engage students at that level is a great gift, and it allows, as I say, education to be the richest sense of the shaping of a person, not simply the imparting of information.
I think I have to ask you about the new Pope. And here are two things I've seen recently, which is one, in social media, I saw when Pope Francis stopped his vehicle, got out, went to a severely disfigured man, kissed him on the forehead, and prayed with him. That came to me through just sort of the digital ether. And then the other is the New York Times writes about conservative Catholics feeling left out by this new Pope. And my Italian barber said, I don't think he knows he's the Pope yet. In other words, what do you make of the Holy Father?
I think he definitely knows he's the Pope. I think on certain things, I think his style, just the incident you mentioned, that's a powerful message in itself. And I think I think the great thing about him is it's not manufactured. I think that's who he is. That's what he does. That in itself is a powerful message. I think that he clearly does want to engage Catholics around the world in a discussion about the gospel in our time. No doubt about that. And I think engaging lay Catholics and not simply articulating the teaching of the Church. The use of what we call synods or councils of bishops or consistories to deliberate seriously on issues, that's a real agenda. And if he can manage to follow through on it, I think it will be an epical papacy. I really do.
Cardinal Dolan talks about a Pope Francis effect. Have you noticed this? I mean, that there are more people coming into church, that there are more people talking about the faith?
Well, that's true. I think Pope Francis is probably has the greatest impact on non-Catholics. I mean, they're tremendously interested in him, as well as Catholics. And certainly there are people who are nervous about some of the things he says, but overall, tremendous excitement. And a call, I think one of his emphases is a call back to the core message of the gospel rather than the latest social controversy. the core message of the gospel, God's love for us, his call to us to respond with love. That is at the core of everything he does. And people are attracted to that. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
And another question, which may, for some of your alumni, be even more complicated than the Pope, which is the football. Notre Dame obviously has an extraordinary tradition.
Mm-hmm.
But football at the professional level is undergoing a pretty tough go of it at the moment. And the moral questions that the students wrestle with as a part of going to college are now in play in terms of whether football can even exist in its current form, and the behavior both on the field, what they're learning now about, what old players, the concussions and the health problems they've had, plus now what we're learning about the culture in the locker room. What's your view of that? I mean, Notre Dame is thought of, many people think of football first when they think of Notre Dame.
Yeah, yes.
How can a morality and football exist in the same sentence?
Well, look, there's no doubt that athletics generally, football in particular, has a powerful place in our culture. Like it, don't like it, it's just a fact. I don't think tomorrow they're going to shut down business. And so the question is, how to approach that sport and all it means for various communities in a way that's responsible, in a way that's elevates it, in a way that elevates us. One of the things I'm most proud of it, I will brag about this, our graduation rate among our student athletes is about 99%. Of those who stay for 4 years, almost everyone gets a degree. I think that's extremely important. And I think if we're going to have a sport to try to reflect on the deeper ideals. There's deep cynicism, I know, about athletics, but there's deep cynicism about a lot of things. That's not a reason to give up a certain set of ideals, a certain set of standards. That's what we strive to do. We're not perfect at Notre Dame. We're not by any means perfect, but that's what we strive to do. And if football's important at a university like Notre Dame, it's important for that reason. We can inject into that reality that's so important in our society something higher, some standard that is not simply self-interest or something worse.
When you are done with your time at Notre Dame, how will you finish this sentence? It's been a success because I've done this.
I think Notre Dame has a distinctive mission in terms of the faith and the highest level of intellectual achievement. I think that's an important thing. All universities are important. I try to be faithful to that. We were founded by a priest, 25 years old, who had a bold vision of going to a wilderness and saying, I'm going to found a great university. If he could come back miraculously and look around and say, that's what I meant. That's what I meant. A great university, the highest level of intellectual achievement with a engagement with faith, that would be success.
Father Jenkins, thank you so much.
John, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.